they know me, you know what I mean? I be just trying to get away, you know what I'm saying? I ain't even famous, none of that. I guess it's just the blessing the Most High put upon me, you know what I mean? Well, to make a long story short, I'm too popular, stay me. 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 I'm too popular, stay home. 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 I'm too popular, stay. I'm too popular, stay cool. I'm too popular, stay cool. I'm too popular, stay cool. I'm too popular. I'm too popular, stay. I'm too popular, stay. I'm too popular, stay cool. Riding away, pursuing the trade, so I can stay away from the grave. Putting in all of my work, believing I'm already paid. Knowing my heritage, I'm never a slave. All praise to God. I'm ducking the cops. In the backyard, growing my crops. I got all my wisdom from pops. Scraping up all of my riches and being content with whatever I got. You feel me, right? Right. So I can stay blessing my people and never give up. You feel me, right? All my people unite. You know that it's time to do right, so that we can do what we like. You gotta lift up your head when you fight. I'm on my knees praying every night. Politicking with the tribes, putting all my pieces to the puzzle together so I can live a good life. In the name of Yahweh Shai, I do this for my people. I gotta keep it peaceful. Better mind your own business. That's the only thing that I can teach you. Gotta keep my foot away from evil. Keeping it G so I can lead you. Spreading my wings just like an eagle. Don't call me African, homie, I'm Hebrew. I'm too popular. I'm too popular. Stay me. I'm too popular. Stay me. I'm too popular. Stay me. I'm too popular. Stay home. 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 I'm too popular. Stay. I'm too popular. Stay cool. I'm too popular. Stay cool. I'm too popular. Stay cool. I'm too popular. I'm too popular. Stay. I'm too popular. Stay. I'm too popular. Stay cool. You gotta know your worth, so you can break the curse. Y'all come from the dirt, so whatever it is, just make it work. If it's like the church, if they misleading you, I speak the truth, I don't talk about what other people do. Yeah, I stay in my own lane. I'm done with the past, I'm done with my old shame. I'm making a difference, you know that I'm gifted. I don't talk it, I live it. I was made in Yah's image. I stay on my toes, I'm persistent. Right. It might cost me my life, but I risk it. Right. Right. You know I'm poetic. The meek shall inherit the earth. I'm just being prophetic. Lately I've been tracing my family tree. Lately I've been focusing on just me. I'm too popular. I'm too popular. I'm too popular. Stay me. I'm too popular. Stay me. I'm too popular. Stay home. 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 I'm too popular. Stay. I'm too popular. Stay cool. I'm too popular. Stay cool. I'm too popular. Stay cool. I'm too popular. I'm too popular. Stay. I'm too popular. Stay. I'm too popular. Stay cool.
I've been going hard all day. I serve the Most High God. Get out my way. I'm living righteous now. All praise, 'cause I've been going hard all day. Yeah, rocking them fringes, scriptures on deck. Pull up with Benzes, Israelites up next. Persuading Jace just to learn to be like me. Trying to look out for your bros so you go and see the light of days. Need to come and join the wave, but you can't be soft. Gotta keep in mind that the Most High is a man of war. Yeah, we're running out of time. Need to open your mind with the spirit of light. Need to light it up. Light it up. All praise. I'm living righteous now. Yeah, 'cause I've been going hard all day. I serve the Most High God. Get out my way. Yeah.
I be going hard about this life every day, yo. Make my nation great again, I'm nothing like Kanye, though. Say like so, we rockin', we be knocking through your stereo. Put my heels on devils, yeah, we fly, we ain't no fairies, so.
Working my fringes, handling business. Wearing compliance, switched up, we on a mission. Got the boy in my spirit, I'm about my father's business. Yeah, we about to light it up, now tell me, can I get away?
144 with the K, my cherry out like a ray. I be going hard for my J's, all praise, what else can I say? Hebrews, we keeping up pace, from out to jungle I came. Cannot you tell me that I'm lying, tell me I ain't the truth without my mate. They call my name Ariana, that's I am flow but no Rasta. See the Holy Ghost but no Tasha, ride M.O.B. but no Hopper. No G.O.D. but Yahweh, rep P.O.P. Prince of Power. I ride with riders, no cowards, keep 12 plus 10 in my trousers.
I've been going hard all day. I serve the Most High God. Get out my way. I'm living righteous now. All praise, 'cause I've been going hard all day. I've been going hard all day. I serve the Most High God. Get out my way. I'm living righteous now. All praise, 'cause I've been going hard.
Back at the back.
Look, acknowledge a king when he in your presence. Time is precious, so count my minutes like counting blessings. Quality life got me feeling ain't got no stressing. I've been feeling like the chosen since my adolescence. Feeling high off life, ain't no coming down. Feeling renowned, a youngin' getting his crown. Finesse dripping, got it looking like a brother Chrisin. Blue ribbon, diamond fringes, now look how I glisten. Correleo on deck, it's a celebration. Pull up a shot with my bros, one for the nation. Cali Brew, so I gotta count it double blessed. Chosen seed from the side that do it the best. Party going up, and we a little faded. Everybody showing love like our name is David. The blessed of the West, and you know we always dress to impress, yeah.
They out here talking it, we out here living it, out here living it.
TGOD, shout out to the gang, let them words, yeah, we really do our thing,
They out here talking it, we out here living it, out here living it. No, I live the sky, I put that on my tribe, 'cause we out here getting it, getting it.
We super fly 'cause we the shit. Excuse my French, but I'm Hebrew, you dig?
Look, this the life that we chose, all love how it goes, fuck those who oppose. Diamond fringes on froze, backstage with my woes, turning up at my shows. Shout out my team, we the truest. On 12, that's the only way we do this. We going up like Josiah at the Passover. The whole squad is legit, baby, we pass. You know, fly girds a must, rock chains a stunt. The only way to do it in this truth, baby. We got ringtones and tracks, speak truth and facts. A whole nother vibe, so we brew crazy, huh? Got these haters mad when they see the view. I was feeling first class when I seen the truth. Living life sucker free as a nation, they all hate and secretly they wanna be.
They out here talking it, we out here living it,
TGOD, shout out to the gang, let them words, yeah, we really do our thing, huh?
They out here talking it, we out here living it, No, I lift the sky, I put that on my tribe, cause we out here getting it.
Yeah, man, that's what we call the RINAP. Tribal society taking over the West. Shalom. Tribe.
Most people get comfortable. They stop growing, they stop working on themselves, they stop stretching, they stop pushing themselves, and they end up becoming very cynical about life, and they throw in the towel on themselves, on their families, and on their dreams. And the other thing is that most people don't feel worthy. What I'm doing now, I could have been doing years ago. But because I did not have a college education, because I didn't believe in myself, because I allowed other people's opinion of me to control my destiny, I didn't act on my ideas. So I applaud you for your dreaming. I can tell you that it's possible.
I'll tell you what, you gotta get off your ass, cause time ain't gonna last. You still ain't got no good job. I remember what you told me, Grandma. Might as well go ahead. All the years and you ain't even got a college degree to show for. Stay ready, you ain't gotta give nothing, nigga. Damn, look like if you stay ready, you ain't gotta get ready.
All praises to Yahweh. I finally made it out the mental chains. Know through your pain, it's a way out. I took the road less traveled, Yahweh's will, you take the same route. Betrayal of death, I don't know what's worse. That daily bread or that bread, what you choosing first? Teach my people how to hustle, that's the easy part. But all the money in this world can change your evil heart. Was born and raised here in Babylon. Told I was nothing but a black man. Never said who I descended from. Kwame Yasharala, yeah, we back, fam. True success ain't what you got, bro. True success is what you are and what you not, bro. Glass ceiling, dodging feelings like potholes. Guard your spirit from these niggas and Diablos. Keep it humble, but you rumble when your line press. Demonize me all you want, but know my kind blessed. This the gospel uncensored, go and tell a friend. Come up out of her, my people cease to dwell in sin. 12 tribes, we the people of the Most High. Don't be surprised to see those chariots come out the sky. Just a prophet, I don't claim to be a known scholar. This is chapter 1 to Zion Ariala.
Israel, where you at? We are RG Flex. My name is Kassan. We about to have some fun. My name is Ida. We give all praise to Yah. My name is Awaria, and we got something for you.
My name is Akaya, and we're gonna bring that fire.
All praises to the Most High. We the chosen, we the Israelites. We serve a Mashiach Yahushua. We do this for our people, we gon' get it right. All praises to the Most High. We the chosen, we the Israelites. We serve a Mashiach Yahushua. We do this for our people, we gon' get it right. All praises to the Most High. His name Yahweh and his son named Yahushua. We always wore our fringes and they wonder why. We're trying to keep these laws, we ain't trying to die. They tell me I'm a color, I know that's a lie. I'm from the seed of Jacob, I'm an Israelite. Turn the other cheek, no, I'd rather fight. These holidays, yeah, there's something that I don't like. Chose to see heathens cringe when I touch the mic. K-Son, never been, I'ma do what's right. We gon' show the youth the truth, in and out the booth. I wear the rare fresh skirt, then a tailor suit. RG Flex, we the generation up next. Deuteronomy 7 and 6, we above the rest. We the best, I ain't talking DJ Khaled. Righteous with the raps, we don't even need no ad-libs. Everybody put your hands up. Hey. Everybody put your hands up. All praises to the Most High. We the chosen, we the Israelites. We serve a Mashiach Yahushai. We do this for our people, we gon' get it right. All praises to the Most High. We the chosen, we the Israelites. We serve a Mashiach Yahushai. We do this for our people, we gon' get it right. You know that I am the greatest. Shout out to the
Welcome everybody, welcome. All right, so the lesson for today is vaccination and experimentation, all right? So in today's lesson, the key thing we want to deal with is actually a few things. First and foremost, reassuring our people do not by any means take this vaccine. Your government is not in your best interest. They have never been in your best interest, especially as it pertains to the medical field. There have been many experiments that have been done with us, not only in past times, 16, 17, 1800s, but 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and it has not stopped, all right? And a lot of things that you see being used and propagated today are used as fear, scare tactics in order to sway us to go ahead and do what is in our government's best interest, but not in ours, all right? And even highlight even furthermore for those who may be on the fence, may not be sure, even foretelling a lot of the proof and how we know so-called white man, who biblically is known as Esau, is the devil. All right, he is a devil, ain't no doubt about it. All right, so we got a lot to cover. I may need to do a part 2 next month as well. So I'm not going to try to rush too much of it, but I am going to go at a brisk pace, okay? Not too fast, not too slow, but I want to get through the information because there's a lot to cover, all right? So now, some of this information may either make you scared or make you upset. For me, it made me upset, just with how much we've been experimented on and we haven't known. You know, that's really what it is. It's highly upsetting, all right? It's highly upsetting, and just how much of a devil, you know, the so-called white man is. I want to get 2 scriptures to kind of paraphrase and start before I get into everything. Get Job. I want to get Job and Maccabees. Get Job chapter 13 and verse 4. And we're also going to get 1 Maccabees. So we're into Job chapter 13 and verse 4. And we're also going to get 1 Maccabees. I actually want 1 Maccabees first. I want to get 1 Maccabees chapter 1. I want to go ahead and get 1 Maccabees chapter 1. And I actually want to get verse 9.
The book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 9. And it reads, and after his death
being the death of Alexander the Greek, all right? This is when the so-called white men first came into power, ruling the world, all right? Or the known world at that time. Read.
They all put crowns upon themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So did their sons after them many years. And evils were multiplied in the earth.
What was multiplied?
And evils were multiplied in the earth.
Whenever the so-called white men obtained power, evils were always multiplied, all right? And that evil is on many different levels. And one of those is his level of cruelty when it comes down to experimentation on people, all right? Let's go ahead from there and get Job chapter 13 and verse 4. So even this stands true even in this day and age. Go ahead and get Job chapter 13 and verse 4.
The book of Job chapter 13 verse 4. But ye are forgers of lies.
So the biggest thing is he is a forger of lies. A lot of his information that he says is scientifically backed is not scientifically backed. A lot of things is experimental. A lot of things is practices, and he makes sure what he puts out to the public is different from what he talks about within his inner circles. He's been doing that for a very long time, and he is very good at it. I won't go too much into it because you'll see it unfold as we bring out the proof and the information. All right? Read on.
Ye are all physicians of no value.
Because the key thing is, to be honest with you, a lot of things they really don't have a cure for. There's not even a cure for the common cold. I kid you not, there's not even a cure for the common cold. All they do is try to put things out that help better the symptoms in terms of what it is they're able to provide medically or medicinally for you. It's just to better the symptoms. Think about it. You take cough drops only suppress the cough. They don't cure it. All you're trying to do is suppress the cough. A lot of things he makes, there aren't as many cures as he would like to say that there are cures for things. He tries to find ways to not cure you, but to try to, and there's a word for it, he doesn't like to treat a lot of disease. He likes to just, properly manage them with drugs, but it never really actually cures you or heals you. He just likes to be able to put you in a place to where you're content through whatever pain or sickness, and hopefully your body can heal itself naturally, or it just keeps you in that, maintaining that state until eventually you just die, collapse, or whatever happens to you. But he doesn't have as much cures for things as people kind of think. He got a cure for damn near everything, and that's not the case. All right, so he really has very little value to the medical field compared to what it is that our forefathers and foremothers knew medicinally when it came down to the plants, herbs, the things the Most High he gave for us. All right. So now let's get into the lesson. All right, the first thing, understanding that the biggest thing that we have is that he puts fear out there. You keep seeing COVID numbers rise and, another 1,000 cases, another 1,000, 3,000 people died, whatever, so and so forth. That's all propaganda. That propaganda was learned through another Edomite named Edward Louis James Bernays, the father of public relations, who knew strategically how to use information and how to strategically put out to the masses to put them in a certain fear or get them to think a certain way. That's what they learned. They mastered the way to get the masses to think a certain way. He mastered that. That's why they push those numbers out there, because you see that and it puts a little fear in you. That's the whole thing. It puts worry. It puts anxiety out there. How bad is it going to get? Are they going to shut things down again? Am I going to lose my job? Man, I'm getting furloughed, getting laid off. They like to put you in that place to where the biggest thing to help you is that vaccine. That's the answer. That's all they have. And think about these other names. Pfizer. I want you to keep that out, because Pfizer vaccine, Pfizer's been involved with some stuff. And you're going to read about that. A lot of these things to where you'll see a lot of these names. I want you to, if anything, pay attention to names. Write things down. Pay attention to names. They're going to come up again and again. Certain scientists involved with things, they're going to come up again and again. They were involved with this over here, and later were involved with this over here, okay? Not everything I'm always going to piece together, but remember the names, okay? Some of the names are more important than anything else. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get to the slide. Now remember, numbers determine restrictions. They inflate the numbers. All these cases are not created equal. They inflate the numbers. The numbers seem bad. People feel that it justifies whatever action the government needs to do. That's what they have. The numbers are getting bad, so it justifies us taking away your liberties. And then they downplay everything. They downplay, we're just closing down non-essential businesses. It's just for a little bit, just till we get this under control. Everything is left vague and ambiguous. Well, it's still not where we need it to be. See, you guys keep going away. You're not following guidelines. That's why it's taking so long. All these people that refuse to listen. Now we got to shut things down again. So they downplay the significance of everything that's being taken away. It's just 6 feet. It's just non-essential, just so the pandemic gets under control. And also, too, they work to use propaganda and slander and humiliate anyone who kind of goes against that status quo. Well, you don't want grandma to get sick, right? I mean, think about it. You want things to go back to normal, right? So even so much more that they're going to use in order to force these vaccines upon us. Well, look, this is the answer. All those people who refuse, you don't want things to go bad, right? We can get out of this hole we're in if we just have more people go ahead and doing what would be in the best interest of the majority. How could you be so selfish? Just worrying about yourself. Think about all those who you're putting in jeopardy. It's all propaganda, but don't believe it. Don't let that tie you in, because that's how they get a good number and split. What's known as America and the country divided between people who are pro and the people who are against. Then everybody else comes out and supports it. Well, see, it's because of people like you I lost my auntie. Just difficult. People are just so dumb. If you would just do what happened, we wouldn't be in this situation. Our livelihoods are at stake. And this is a time you're selfish. Just can't even wear a mask. Can't even just do the right thing, the American thing. Adding that pressure. So now and then the same thing. There is, you must be safe. You're not safe until you've been vaccinated and all those around you have been vaccinated. Then we can have stability. No masks, no entry, no restaurants, gyms, grocery stores. Now, mandatory masks turn into mandatory vaccinations. Where's your vaccination certificate? Where's your vaccination waiver? Where's any proof? A lot of these jobs, they're looking mandatory vaccinations. Government saying, we're not going to do it, but push through the jobs. Jobs, we don't feel safe unless all our employees are vaccinated. We got to make sure everyone's getting their doses. Otherwise, you can't come into work. It's an easy thing for them to do. Look how far they've gone so far. All it takes is a little bit of fear, and people will go ahead and roll over. But we can't be fearful. We've been so comfortable for so long, we can't even imagine being uncomfortable. But this is the time we got to rely more and more on each other in the security we have with each other, to be able to lean on each other. We're going to need that more and more. So let's go ahead. Get the PowerPoint. Let's go to the slide. Let's get to my portfolio. All right. So we're back in my portfolio. So I'm going to go here, and we're going to get a few things. Science gone wrong, and we're going to get one of the first experiments talking about MK Ultra. Some of you may have heard of MK Ultra, all right? These are experiments getting different things. MK Ultra is a form of mind control. This is from Princeton, MK-Ultra.edu, Project MK-Ultra. So Project MK-Ultra was the code name for a covert illegal CIA human research program run by the Office of Scientific Intelligence. The official U.S. government program began in the early 1950s, continuing at least through the late 1960s, and has used U.S. and Canadian citizens as its test subjects. So now, read a majority of the highlights. I won't read everything for a page, but majority of the highlights. So now, the use of many methodologies to manipulate individual mental states and alter brain functions, including the surreptitious administration of drugs and other chemicals, sensory deprivation, isolation, and verbal and sexual abuse. Project MK-Ultra was first brought to wide public attention in 1975 by the U.S. Congress through investigation by the Church Committee and by a presidential commission known as the Rockefeller Commission. Investigative efforts were hampered by the fact that CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK-Ultra files destroyed in 1973. Skimming down, in 1977, an FOIA request uncovered a cache of 20,000 documents relating to Project MK-Ultra, which led to the Senate hearings of 1977. In recent times, most information regarding MK-Ultra has been officially declassified. Although CIA insists that MK-Ultra type experiments have been abandoned, 14-year CIA veteran Victor Marchetti has stated in various interviews that the CIA routinely conducts disinformation campaigns and that the CIA mind control research continued. That's the thing. A lot of things Esau says publicly he stopped doing, he still does, but he just has to tell you we're not doing that anymore. You can rest assured we stopped. Dave, continue the investigations, switch the lab, removing the Connecticut. That's what he does. That's all it is. And he's been doing that for years. So now, Marchetti specifically called the CIA claim that MK-Ultra was abandoned a cover story. That's what they do. They just got a propaganda. Put it out there. We're not doing that. It's unethical. We don't want the people to lose trust in us. You know what to do. Lie as always. He's the father of it. On the Senate floor in 1977, Senator Ted Kennedy said the deputy director of the CIA revealed that over 30 universities and institutions were involved in an extensive testing and experimentation program which included covert drug tests on unwitting citizens at all social levels, high and low, Native Americans and foreign. Native Americans not necessarily being indigenous people, but Native American being those native to American soil, all right, as well as those who are also foreign in other locations, all right? So now, several of these tests involved the administration of LSD to unwitting subjects in social situations. At least one death, that of Dr. Olson, resulted from these activities. The agency itself acknowledged that these tests made little scientific sense. Pay attention to some of these key words. Universities, little scientific sense. Continued. Pay attention to those things. You're going to hear it again and again and again. We're building a case here, all right? The agents doing the monitoring were not qualified scientific observers. So now, this is just another source from McGillDaily.com, all right? So the MK-Ultra violence, so the Allen Memorial Institute and Royal Victory Hospital, the Scottish-born Dr. Donald Aaron Cameron. Cameron's experiments, known as MK-Ultra, Sub-Project 68, were partially funded by the CIA and the Canadian government and are widely known for the use of LSD, barbiturates, and amphetamines on patients, all right? So that's all I'm going to generally get from right there. I'm going to go ahead and end that on MK-Ultra. There is more information on it, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next thing, Agent Orange. Agent Orange. This is from History.com. Agent Orange was a powerful mixture of chemical defoliants used by U.S. military forces during the Vietnam War to eliminate forest cover for North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops, as well as crops that might be used to feed them. The U.S. program of defoliation, codenamed Operation Ranch Hand, sprayed more than 19 million gallons of herbicides over 4.5 million acres of land in Vietnam from 1961 to 1972. Agent Orange was contained the chemical dioxin. The chemical dioxin. I'll repeat things twice if it's important, all right? That might help you guys out. Were the most commonly used of the herbicide mixtures, and the most effective. It was later revealed to cause serious health issues, including tumors, birth defects, rashes, psychological symptoms, and cancer among returning U.S. servicemen and their families, as well as among the Vietnamese population. I'm going to skip this page. Effects of Agent Orange in Vietnam. In addition to massive environmental impact of the U.S. defoliation program in Vietnam, that nation has reported that some 400,000 people were killed or maimed as a result of exposure to herbicides like Agent Orange. All right, so that's one of the key things to remember. Okay, I'm going to skip it. There's just more information on Agent Orange, how they were spraying. You said U.S. veterans and anti-Vietnamese people still dying from Agent Orange. No, these are Edomites trying to fight and speak up about what it is that happened to them. So this is just Agent Orange, some of the propaganda, but these are the effects. This is what happened to them, the Vietnamese people. These are all effects of Agent Orange. Now it says eating, drinking, touching, breathing, nursing, conceiving. There are many ways for dioxin, the toxic contaminant Agent Orange, to enter the human body. From food, from breast milk, from the vapors, from physical contact. There is no doubt that during and after the war, many Vietnamese absorbed this very toxic material, dioxin. It is our belief from toxicological research and epidemiological studies from many countries that this dioxin probably resulted in significant health effects in Vietnam. Arnold Schechter and John Constable. So now, up to 24 dioxin hotspots found around some of the former U.S. military bases in southern Vietnam. A new generation of Vietnamese are continuing to be exposed to dioxin that can be traced directly back to the use of herbicides during the Vietnam War. I have no future, no happiness. Dodushi Duil, 12 of whose 15 children died before age 3, and father of a teenager with congenital brain seizures, Chicago Tribune, 2009. The numbers. First is the past direct exposure to the population during the years of spraying over a period of 10 years. Second are those who may have been exposed to dioxin in the years during the immediately following the spraying through the contaminated soil and sediment, and or through contaminated fish and animals. Third are those who are currently being exposed to the TCDD that remains in the soil and sediment and is entering the food chain at the dioxin hotspots where the herbicides were stored, loaded onto airplanes, or spilled. In addition, there are those in the second and even third generations who are not directly exposed, but who are potentially being impacted due to their parents' or grandparents' exposure. Skipping down, the population of South Vietnam during the years of herbicide spraying was approximately 18 million. The Vietnam Red Cross estimates that 3 million Vietnamese have been affected by Agent Orange, including 150,000 children born with birth defects. However, this estimate is based on figures from a survey from the late 1990s and is in need of revision. One quarter that has not been heard, that is Vietnamese exposed to Agent Orange who subsequently immigrated to the U.S. or to other countries. Agent Orange has given me a death sentence. The U.S. Army sprayed, once again, the U.S. Army sprayed 18 million gallons of the toxic chemical Agent Orange over Vietnam to destroy food sources and defoliate hiding places of the Viet Cong. 3 million Vietnamese are still suffering from the effects of the poison, which can cause birth defects and cancer. So now the impact on the environment and is now affecting the third generation of victims. Vietnamese victims have yet to receive any compensation. So now I'm going to skip a few of these, and I really want to get this one. A poison legacy. Contractor who worked at England's Agent Orange spray field still live with its effects. I'm just getting some of the highlights. And then I'm also going to get one more thing that tells. In 2004, a group of Vietnamese citizens filed a class action lawsuit against more than 30 chemical companies, including the same ones that settled with the U.S. veterans in 1984. The suit, which sought billions of dollars worth of damages, claimed that Agent Orange and its poison effects left a legacy of health problems, and that in its use constituted a violation of international law. In March 2005, a federal judge in Brooklyn, New York, dismissed the suit. Again, a federal judge in Brooklyn, New York, dismissed the suit. Another U.S. court rejected a final appeal in 2008. They said, you ain't getting nothing. Casualty of war. Deal with it. That's how the white man get down. Next, Operation Paperclip. This one is very important and lays out with everything that goes on. So once again, Operation Paperclip. The Nazis didn't lose, they moved to America. From 1945 to 1955, Operation Paperclip granted nearly 1,000 German scientists American citizenship. Many had been longtime members of the Nazi Party. Many had been longtime members of the Nazi Party and the Gestapo and had conducted experiments on humans at concentration camps and committed other war crimes. The scientists ended up in the U.S. military. Again, the scientists ended up in the U.S. military industrial complex, worked with the CIA, NASA, and more. One of the Nazi experiments that continued in America was mind control, known as the CIA's Project MK Ultra. Start connecting the dots. Take notes. GlobalResearch.ca. A recently completed inventory at a major U.S. Army biodefense facility found nearly 10,000 more vials of potentially lethal pathogens that were known to be stored at the site. Skipping down. The GSN reports that while half of the newfound material was destroyed after being recorded, Inventory Control Officer Sam Edwin told reporters that the other half was deemed worthy for further scientific use, cataloged and stored in the center's containment freezers. Some may remember the movie Contagion, other movies. They do. When they find outbreaks, they save contagions for later. They save it and they experiment and they release those things later. They do that, and as you'll read on. More pertinently, what happens when the state itself turns rogue and under cover of national security in the endless war on terror creates the acute risk in the form of out-of-control laboratories designed to protect against bioweapons that instead have become a source for them. Skipping down. August 1945, Operation Paperclip, programmed to import top Nazi scientists into the United States. Dr. Kurt Bloom was saved from the gallows due to American intervention. Bloom admitted he had worked on Nazi bacteriological warfare projects and had experimented on concentration camp prisoners with bubonic plague and sarin gas at Auschwitz. After his acquittal in 1947, Nuremberg doctors trial, Bloom was recruited by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps and advised the Pentagon on biological warfare. Walter Paul Emil Skirber, a Wehrmacht general who assigned doctors to experiment on concentration camp prisoners, and dispersed state funds for such experiments, was another paperclip recruit. In 1951, Schreiber went to work for the U.S. Air Force School of Medicine. Herbert Stronghold, the so-called father of space medicine, discussed and carried out experiments on Dachau inmates who were tortured and killed. Struggle worked for the U.S. Air Force. Erich Traub, a rabid Nazi and the former chief of Heinrich Himmler's Reims, the Nazi state's secret biological warfare research facility, defects to the United States. Traub was brought to the U.S. by paperclip operatives and worked at the Naval Medical Research Institution and gave operational advice to the CIA and the bio-warriors at Fort Detrick. September 1945, General Shiro Ishii's Unit 731, a secret research group that organized Japan's chemical and biological warfare programs, is granted amnesty. Is granted amnesty by Supreme Allied Commander in the Pacific, General Douglas MacArthur, in exchange for providing America with the voluminous files on biological warfare. All mention of Unit 731 is expunged from the record of the Tokyo war crimes. That's all I needed from that. Project Paperclip. Next up, experiments on children. You can learn about this man from the documentary Hole in the Head and others like him, how they were treated and experimented on radiation as kids. Hole in the Head, a life revealed. Again, Hole in the Head, a life revealed. You can read about this man's story. Let's get into it. A dark chapter of medical history is from CBSNews.com. Karen Iles was just 10 when she lost her baby brother, Mark Dow Mullen, in 1961. Life would be a struggle for the Dale Molins because Mark was born with cerebral palsy, a condition that cripples the body but not necessarily the mind. In the 50s, cerebral palsy children were considered to be developmentally disabled, mentally retarded, says Al to correspondent Vicky Mabry. I never believed he was mentally retarded when you looked into his eyes. He communicated through his eyes. He'd laugh and giggle and kick and just screech when he saw us. But by 3, Mark could neither walk nor talk, which meant his mother, Rosemary, had to care for him. We know he recognized everybody, says Rosemary. He would laugh or he would cry if he was unhappy, skipping down. Doctors advised that Dale Molins to commit their son, so Bill told Rosemary they had to send Mark to an institution. It was November 1958. Rosemary committed 3-year-old Mark to Sonoma State Hospital, the largest institution for children in California. At the time, the hospital housed 3,500 children with diverse needs, from babies born with minor defects, like a cleft palate or a club foot, to children with epilepsy and Down syndrome. While the severely disabled languished in overcrowded rooms, the able-bodied were put to work in the institution's dairies and orchards. Rosemary did something more than the other parents who had committed their children to Sonoma State did not. She visited her son every Wednesday. It was just a small thing that I can still do is to go see him, says Rosemary, because most of these children, they never see their parents again. But those visits came at an abrupt end on Memorial Day 1961 when Mark was 6. I picked up the phone and I heard a voice. Is Mrs. Dahl-Mullen in? And I just knew, says Karen. They didn't even say where they were calling from, but this dread came into my heart. And I got my mom and I left. I ran. I hid. Nobody told me. I knew he was dead. From that day on, Karen and her sisters, Chris and Gall, said they never spoke Mark's name again. They buried their grief, grew up, and had families of their own. But after 40 years, they still struggle with the decision to institutionalize their brother. Skipping down. In 1994, haunted by thoughts of her baby brother, Karen decided to devote all her spare time to answering the question that had burdened her for decades. How exactly did Mark die? I just needed to know, and no matter what it was, I needed to know. So I went to the recorder's office, says Karen. There was no death certificate. One of the clerks came over to the front desk, leaned over, and there was no death certificate. One of the clerks came over, and I said 1958, and she said, you better look into it because strange things happened there. Things got stranger still when Karen noticed an article in the local paper saying 16,000 people, including children, had been used in radiation experiments. Out of curiosity, I started to read it, and they mentioned patients that were in state-run hospitals being used. Says Karen, and I just go, oh my God, this could be it. Then President Clinton had just ordered thousands of secret documents on government-sponsored human radiation experiments declassified and made available on the internet. Karen found a study funded by the federal government involving 1,100 Sonoma State cerebral palsy patients from 1955 to 1960. One document she also found showed that her brother had been part of the study, assigned specimen number 8732. Karen wasn't able to find out what tests, if any, Mark was subjected to. But some of the patients in Sonoma State study were put through painful procedures like the pneumocephalogram, in which air is injected into the brain before a series of x-rays. Imagine puncturing someone's spinal cord, drawing fluid out, and putting a foreign substance in there. Gas, says Karen. When they trap air in your body, you're in pain, excruciating pain for days. They were the raw material of medical research, says Susan Litterer, who teaches medical history at Yale University. She was a member of the presidential committee that investigated the radiation experiments, and she says she wasn't shocked by the findings because researchers have been using disabled children in experiments for over a century. Children in orphanages, children in homes of the mentally retarded, these are all good populations from the sense of medical research because you have an easily accessible group of people living in controlled circumstances and you can monitor them, said Litterer. Litterer read the study that was conducted at Sonoma State Hospital and said the children underwent painful experimentation for which they received no direct benefit. It seems clear that these intended to enlarge knowledge about cerebral palsy, as Litterer. Skipping down, Sonoma State is now known as Sonoma Developmental Center. During her 12-year search, Karen repeatedly wrote to the current administrator looking for information about Mark. She was told there was no records on radiation studies at Sonoma, and that there was no record that your brother was involved in radiation research. And I'd say, just go to the Human Radiation website and put in Sonoma State Hospital in your search and documents come up, says Karen. You gotta have something there. No, they deny it. If I called her right now, she'd deny it. Administrator Thursa Murphy has worked on Sonoma State for 30 years. She said she didn't have any information about the medical experimentation that was taking place at the institution. So we'll skip down. But that's one of the biggest ones. Moving on from there, from the radiation experiments done on those children, we're going to get in the name of science. Skipping down, in the name of science and medicine. How the U.S. government exposed thousands of Americans to lethal bacteria to test biological warfare. Homeland Security Department last month released what they said was non-toxic gas in New York's Grand Central Station to trace how chemicals might flow through the terminal in a terrorist attack. We speak with biological and chemical terrorism expert Leonard Cole. Leonard Cole, who asked what this non-toxic gas actually was. He wrote a book about how in the 1950s and 1960s, U.S. government scientists ran a series of tests to determine how easy it would be to expose large numbers of people to a lethal bacteria. In the aftermath of the London bombings, the U.S. government raised the terrorist threat level to orange or high. The alert was practically applied to the nation's trains and subway systems. Although far less money has been spent on security measures for public transportation than for the airline industry, experts say subways and trains may be particularly vulnerable to chemical and biological attacks. Late last month, the Homeland Security Department released what they had said, non-toxic gas in New York's Grand Central Station to trace how chemicals might flow through the terminal in a terrorist attack. Skipping down. 1950 and 60, scientists from the Fort Detrick, once again, we mentioned that earlier, Fort Detrick Biological Weapons Program ran a series of tests to determine how easy it would be to expose large numbers of people to lethal bacteria. Containers of non-toxic bacteria were planted in the New York subway. Bacteria was secretly pumped into the Pentagon ventilation system, and clouds of bacteria were released in San Francisco. And germs that were meant to sicken, but not kill humans, were tested on conscientious objectors in the military. Again, that were meant to sicken, but not kill humans, were tested on conscientious objectors in the military. Leonard Cole, an adjunct professor of political science at Rutgers Newark in New Jersey, an expert in biological and chemical terrorism, Cole is also the author of The 11th Plague, The Politics of Chemical and Biological Warfare, and the Anthrax Letters, a medical detective story. So now, this is a rushed transcript. Copy may not be in its final form. Amy Goodman. To talk about all this, we're joined by Leonard Cole, who has written a book about the subject, The 11th Plague. Well, let's go to something we know more about, and that is a previous experience in New York subways. Can you talk about that in as much detail as you know? Sure. When did it happen? The test in the subways was in 1966, and it was part of an experimental program that lasted 20 years, beginning in 1949, ending only in 1969. During that period, the Army acknowledged that some 239 vulnerability tests had been conducted in which large numbers of people, of human citizens of this country, were exposed. They emphasized that the materials that were used to simulate anthrax and other deadly organisms was harmless. But in my research and in the work that was published in the book, it was very clear that some of the materials were not totally harmless. That when you expose 1 million or 2 or 3 million people to relatively harmless materials, you still have a certain segment of the population that would be at risk. Amy Goodman, so talk about specifically what happened in the subway. Sure. How many agents went underground? Leonard Cole. When you use the word agent, it has a double meaning. Sometimes it means human beings who are actually conducting the experiments. Sometimes, and the Army refers to them, the tests, the people actually refer to the organisms as agents that were released. So I'll try to be careful. So, how many agents were released agents? Well, we don't know. How many agents went down to release? There were probably somewhere, my guess is, in the order of anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen. More importantly, the number of bacterial agents that were released ranged in the trillions. In fact, the way this was done was kind of bizarre and yet interesting. A light bulb was filled with some 87 trillion organisms, something called Bacillus subtilis. And this was Bacillus, this bacterium, and is common in nature. And as I said before, most people would not be affected. However, some people in immune-compromised situations, very old people, babies, they would be more susceptible. When you say released, you're talking light. They're put into light bulbs. They were placed in Army laboratories in light bulbs and mixed with charcoal. The human agent would carry a paper bag containing some light bulbs filled with bacterium. Black light bulbs? I don't know what the color light bulbs were, but he would walk down during peak traffic hours to various subway platforms. This was during a 6-day period in September 1966. As the train would be coming to the station, he would take a light bulb out of the bag, drop it into the tracks, and as the train entered, you would see a whoosh of darkened air. darkened clouds. The darkness came from the charcoal that was mixed with the bacteria, because the bacteria themselves were invisible. There are various detection devices set up around the subway system so one could then estimate how many bacteria had survived and how many of them had concentrated in various areas. At the end of 6 days, as reports were written, the ultimate report said that if as they said, a pathogenic organism were released, that more than half of the people were riding the subways could have become deathly ill. So now, bam. Okay. Leonard Cole, sure. This was perhaps the most dramatic and well-reported incident, which we learned about only decades after it was actually conducted. In 1950, another bacterium, and any doctors or microbiologists will recognize this immediately as not something that you should play around with. It was called Serratia marcescens. These bacteria were released from the Bay of San Francisco. A boat was spraying trillions of these bacteria on shore. And this is very interesting because in San Francisco in 1950, a major hospital, University Hospital, Stanford University Hospital, was located, and they had never recorded any infections from Serratia marcescens. Unbeknown to the doctors or anybody in the hospital, the Army released the bacteria. 3 days later, a case of the Serratia marcescens was discovered in the hospital. A dozen or so occurred in the subsequent months. One of the patients died of Serratia infection. Amy Goodman. What does this mean? What happened to the person? These bacteria colonized his heart valve. The bacteria can infect various organs of the body. So skipping down, mind you, the test occurred in 1950. There were news reports about the test for the first time in the year 1976 and 1977. So now, Leonard Cole. Oh, I think that there's no reason to think that they won't continue. Skipping down. There are a lot of things that have happened in retrospect that sound amazing. For example, it wasn't until 2 years ago or 3 years ago, actually in the year 2001, that we even had regulations that required scientists who handle these virulent, dangerous bacteria to report to the Center for Disease Control that they have them in stock. But until now, or until that period, people had stocks of terribly dangerous materials in their laboratories, and nobody would necessarily know about them, except they themselves who had them there. That's all we need from that. Let me get, decades later, condemnation for a Skid Row cancer study. A medical researcher from Columbia University, Dr. Perry Hudson, made the Skid Row alcoholics in Lower Manhattan an offer. If they agreed to surgical biopsies of their prostate, they would get a clean bed and 3 square meals for a few days, plus free medical care and treatment if they had prostate cancer. It was the 1950s, and Dr. Hudson was trying to prove that prostate cancer could be caught early and cured, but he did not warn the men he was recruiting that the biopsies to research for cancer could cause impotence and rectal tears, or that the treatment, should cancer be found, surgery to remove their prostates and often their testicles, had not been proven to prolong life. But he said in a recent telephone interview that he believed the treatments did prolong life. I told them the cure rate is extremely high, he said. More than 1,200 men living in flop houses on the Bowery signed up for Dr. Hudson's study in the 1950s and 60s. Neither his academic peers nor the federal officials overseeing his grants criticized his ethics. So once again, neither his academic peers nor the federal officials overseeing his grants criticized his ethics. But times have changed. 2 papers published on Thursday, American Journal of Public Health and the Bulletin of History of Medicine, prompted medical historians to denounce this largely forgotten chapter in the history of government-financed medical research on vulnerable populations. Dr. Hudson himself makes no apologies for recruiting impoverished alcoholics. Now 96 and living in South Pasadena, Florida, he said in recent interviews that the men volunteered, they were not paid, and they got the best care in New York. This is a picture of the man. The after effects. Aware of Dr. Hudson's contention that the biopsy would not cause serious injuries
Two urologists published case reports in 1957 on the experience of 24 men who had biopsies that found no cancer. Many of them had serious complications, including rectal lacerations. A third of them became impotent. Another third had diminished sexual function. About 100 of the men who participated in the Bowery study were found to have cancer and aggressively treated for it with surgery, and for many, estrogen, a combination of therapy that was far from the standard of care at that time. The Bowery study had a laudable goal to prove that prostate cancer could be caught early and cured it. It yielded little credible data. Dr. Hudson did not set up a control group of Bowery men who did not get the biopsies and treatment. As a result, he had no way of comparing the men who got their interventions with those who did not, or of documenting whether the men he treated lived longer. Hudson, in short, proved nothing. This is from albany.edu. Alan M. Holmblum, Acres of Skin, Human Experiments at Holmesburg Prison, New York. Be clear on this. The agencies involved in the scandalous science, the University of Pennsylvania and its medical college, especially the Department of Dermatology, its chief big-name dermatologist, Albert M. Kligman, now emeritus, every big pharmaceutical company in the country, every big pharmaceutical company in the country, the FDA, the NIH, DOD, AEC, the Army, and of course the CIA, operating through the Macy Foundation and the Gestringer Fund, all of these were the abusers. That's a very telling list. The abused were prisoners at Holmesburg, and many of the abused were not convicts, but poor people who could not raise bail, and so were simply detainees in the jail. And along comes the University of Pennsylvania researchers, and these poor people are offered $50 and more to participate in experiments. $50 seemed a lot of money at the time, so these men volunteered, and thereby, at least as far as Kligman was concerned, gave their informed consent. Of course, their participation was not completely voluntary, according to the Nuremberg Code, which was in effect in 1947. But apparently that code applied to those German brutes, but not to hustling academics and their finance offers. Over the years, no one seemed to object, even though the research was very public. There were plenty of publications, and not merely ones in medical journals, but also in Life and Reader's Digest, where Kligman was made out a hero, a successful researcher. No one seemed to give a damn for the prisoners. Of course, there were the Hippocratic Oath and that old idea of primum non nocere, or first do no harm, that was not applied to the case of Holmesburg. So everyone looked the other way, and poor men suffered in the name of science. It would appear that anything can be done in the name of science, if, of course, you have the right credentials and the right academic background. Skipping down, those who understand sciences know that it is a hit or miss process. They know that science proceeds very slowly. They also know that in spite of their pretensions, scientists are ambitious, untrained in ethics, quote, scientists, typically unsupervised, well-funded, and usually convinced of the rightness of their ideas. Such men and women are dangerous, as they are willing to do whatever is deemed necessary by them, of course, for the greater good. They are willing to use subjects with the explanation, I am only doing science. Frankly, that sounds awful. Close to, I was only following orders. That was Alan M. Holmblum, Acres of Skin, Human Experiments at Holmesburg's Prison, New York, 1998. Skipping down, and what Dr. Albert M. Kligman did in those years at Holmesburg's prison is, in a sense, impressive. He developed Radin A, a fabulously successful dermatological cream, which has made big bucks for him and for Johnson & Johnson, and the marketing of which was itself pretty sleazy. He also got FDA approved for hundreds of pharmaceuticals. He tested various mind-altering substances for the CIA and the military. In short, he conducted a research laboratory at top speed for more than 2 decades. He was a one-man research institution and wonderfully successful in his academic career. The simple number of studies the guy was conducting should have been a warning that some hustling was being done. But, again, nobody seemed to notice or care. So long as Kligman was a productive scientist, he could and did continue to do his work on prisoners. Kligman's work was ended not by complaints from subjects, nor from prison authorities, and certainly not from the university or the medical school. His fell victim to a changing climate of opinion brought about by the exposure of the Tuskegee experiment and the exposure of the CIA's efforts at mind control. There was a new awareness of government-sponsored or university-sponsored research. Attitudes towards scientific research was changing. There had been horror stories. Holmberg was victim of changing attitudes and a temporary awareness of subject abuse by the public and Congress. I should add, no one at Holmesburg suffered any punishment for what they did to prisoners. They just went out of business. And yes, many were black at Holmesburg. No different than what they did here. So now, moving back, that takes care of in the name of science. Next section, Dr. William Thompson. Let's get him. Moving out and moving to notable figures, Esau. Dr. William Thompson. This is Dr. William Thompson, CDC whistleblower. Let's get some of his notable work. I'm just looking at this and I'm like, oh my God. I cannot believe we did what we did, but we did. Bear the data on all these children. It's all there. I have handwritten notes. It's probably the lowest point in my career that I went along with it. 2004 MMR paper, Dr. William Thompson, senior CDC scientist. It was also on the news, vaccine controversy, over 100,000 documents handed over. You can also watch the documentary Vax, From Cover Up to Catastrophe. Let's get some background. The Voice for a Choice, CDC whistleblower and corruption. Till there's reform, curtailing the pharmaceutical industry's overreaching liability-free marketing influence over vaccine policy and law, vaccine mandates must be stopped or given a moratorium. We're going to read a little bit about this. Dr. William Thompson is currently a senior scientist at the CDC, Center for Disease Control, whose lawyers released a statement, read full statement here, from him on August 27, 2014, which included the following. I regret that my co-authors and I omitted statistically significant information in our 2004 article published in the journal Pediatrics. The omitted data suggested that African American males who received the MMR vaccine, which is a measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, before age 36 months were at increased risk for autism. Decisions were made regarding which findings to report after the data were collected. And I believe that the final study protocol was not followed. My concern has been the decision to omit relevant findings in a particular study for a particular subgroup for a particular vaccine. There have always been recognized risks for vaccination, and I believe it is the responsibility of the CDC to properly convey the risks associated with receipt of these vaccines. Dr. William Thompson is the author of 2 of the 3 epidemiological studies touted by the CDC to prove the safety of thimerosal. He is also co-author of the CDC's 2004 Di Stefano study, which dismissed the link between the MMR vaccine and autism. That study has been cited in 91 subsequent published studies and is one of the principal cornerstones for claims by the CDC and the vaccine industry that vaccines do not cause autism. Thompson now confesses that he and his fellow CDC researchers found a strong autism signal in children who received the MMR vaccine before their 3rd birthday. Under orders from their bosses, the scientists eliminated this data from the final published study. Vaccine whistleblower exposed autism research fraud at the CDC by Kevin Berry, Esquire, with a foreword by Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. Keep it down. Going to the next. So, Dr. Brian Hooker's official statement regarding William Thompson. Brian S. Hooker, Science Advisor, Focus for Health. Thompson and I spoke on the phone more than 40 times over a 10-month period, and he shared thousands of pages of CDC documents with me. Eventually, Dr. Thompson turned this information over to Congress via Rep. Bill Posey of Florida. Among the issues discussed in the phone conversations were lies told to the public by the CDC regarding the link between thimerosal containing vaccines and neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism, as well as the link between the MMR vaccine and autism in African American males, and the MMR vaccine and isolated autism. Isolated autism is a term coined by CDC researchers referring to all children who received an autism diagnosis without additional diagnosis of mental retardation, cerebral palsy, visual impairment, or hearing impairment. Very recently, Dr. Richard Morgan S., Dr. Thompson's whistleblower attorney, stated that Dr. Thompson will be publishing a paper in May 2016 where he will assert that the MMR vaccine is not linked to autism in African American males. Instead, Dr. Thompson will state that socioeconomic factors alone in the African American community account for the original MMR African American male effect. The effect that he is on record as stating the CDC purposefully hid. I have not been given access to Dr. Thompson's reanalysis and therefore cannot comment regarding the forthcoming paper at this time. However, I am suspect of any analysis coming from the CDC due to the historic nature of the agency's scientific misconduct and conflicts of interest, specifically around any link between vaccines and autism. They say, well, it wasn't us. It was just because of where blacks live, y'all socioeconomic standards. That's why they got it. It had nothing to do with the vaccine. So they say. Regardless of the content of Dr. Thompson's reanalysis paper, these facts remain. 1, CDC scientists colluded to cover up a relationship between the timing of the MMR vaccine and autism in African Americans that was first discovered in November of 2001. Rather than reporting the results to the public, all data regarding this relationship were destroyed at a secret meeting held sometime in August or September of 2002. The fact has been affirmed via an affidavit given by Dr. Thompson to Representative Bill Policy in September 2014. Number 2, Dr. Thompson attempted to warn the CDC director at the time, Dr. Julie Gerdending, regarding this relationship prior to the February 2004 Institute of Medicine meeting on vaccines and autism. Rather than allowing Dr. Thompson to present the information at this meeting, Dr. Gerenberg replaced him as a speaker with Dr. Frank DeStefano, current director of the CDC's Immunization Safety Office, where he presented fraudulent results regarding the MMR vaccine and autism. Dr. Thompson was put on administrative leave and was threatened that he would be fired due to insubordination. Number 3, when Dr. Thompson attempted to leave the CDC later that same year, he was given a $24,000 retention bonus. Dr. Thompson's impression of the timing of this bonus in light of disciplinary actions taken against him earlier that year is that CDC officials were buying his silence through controlling his actions as a CDC employee. Number 4, Dr. Thompson has published 2 papers linking thimerosal exposure in infant vaccines to ticks in boys. Thompson et al. 2007 and Bally et al. 2012. CDC fraudulently maintains on their website that there is no evidence of harm caused by the low doses of thimerosal in vaccine, except for minor reactions like redness and swelling at the injection site. Number 5, CDC pressured Dr. Thompson to downplay the tick results of the analysis in his 2007 paper. He was instructed to de-emphasize the tick result by the CDC's chief science officer, Dr. Tanjay Popovic, by emphasizing that the major findings of the study was there is no association of thimerosal exposure with the great majority of the outcomes. Dr. Popovic also instructed Dr. Thompson to interpret any negative outcomes as chance findings. 6, CDC also pressured Dr. Thompson to withhold publication of his 2012 paper, which reported a relationship between thimerosal and ticks, and Dr. Ed Travathon, head of the CDC's National Center for Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, stated in April 27, 2009 memo to him that the analysis was sound except for the tick results and that they should be omitted from the publication. Since the tick result was the only result that had a consistent negative relationship with thimerosal exposure, it seemed that Dr. Thompson's superiors were specifically concerned that thimerosal's safety and use not be questioned. As an epidemiologist, Dr. Thompson was justifiably concerned and critical of the CDC's action to approve the paper for publication only after the CDC took the extraordinary step of adding an experiment in ticks to water down the paper to state. This finding should be interpreted with caution due to limitations in the measurement of ticks and the limited biological plausibility regarding a causal relationship. That's it from him as the CDC whistleblower. So now moving on to the next person, Larry Ford, biowarfare. Where did I put Larry Ford? Right here at the bottom. Let's just get to the video. Maybe make sure the audio is up. Oh, computer.
This neighborhood, They had no idea what he was up to, that he was working with the South African Germ Warfare Program. Larry Ford was messing around with chemical biological warfare.
Larry was a wonderful fellow, mad as a hatter. He used to rock up in South Africa, having flown intercontinental flights with a trousers pocket full of goodies in sealed vials that he claimed were new and wonderful organisms and could do the most wonderful things on Earth.
Larry Ford had mutated cholera, typhoid, anthrax, botulism, bubonic plague, and had also come up with germs that he called kaffir-killing germs. Kaffir, as you may know, in Afrikaans, is the equivalent of the N-word. So these were germs that were specifically engineered to kill only black people.
In other words, an ethnic biological weapon. Had Project Coast really gone this far?
From the beginning, this idea of can we find a way to control the size of the black population was considered one of the most important areas of research. It got even more important over time as the size of the black population and the seriousness of the uprisings increased. So that's one reason why they got into genetic modification, research into is there a way to have contraceptives that could somehow basically sterilize blacks without them knowing it, and kind of all kinds of what at the time or in hindsight seemed like pretty far out research.
There was some talk about an ethnic weapon Project Coast working on. There was, quote, black bomb.
That was great, yeah, that was the most fun I've had in my life. That whole episode of the ethnic weapon was very well set out in court, in the court papers. What happened is we had the objective to synthesize a certain protein that was in sperm for contraceptive purposes. The objective was that if you could immunize a woman against sperm, then you would make her infertile. We were asked to do this by another country who had a population explosion problem as part of an exchange of technology. They were giving us other stuff. They asked, well, we haven't got the time or the place to do that. Will you guys do that?
All right, beautiful. That's all we needed from that. And moving back, we're gonna go back into, and then science gone wrong. Mad scientists, let's go ahead and let's get back into this. And the next area we're gonna get, Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment. Although some have heard about it, I'm just gonna get highlights. This is from another book I mentioned, When Doctors Kill, Who, Why, and How. All right, let's get this. So page 90, between 1932 and 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service, let me zoom in, I'm sorry. There we go, that's better. Anytime you need me to zoom in, just say zoom in. All right, between 1932 and 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service in Tuskegee, Alabama, carried out a clinical study entitled The Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male, later known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. So they had selected 399 infected subjects, plus 201 patients without syphilis to serve as a control group, who were poor and mostly illiterate black sharecroppers. After screening more than 4,000 of them for the disease, in exchange for being in the study, their participants were provided free medical treatment, rides to the clinic, meals, and burial insurance in case of death. Initially, the intention of the study was to study the prevalence of the disease, its natural history, and the effectiveness of available treatments. When the study started, the fatal outcome of syphilitic infections was well known, but standard treatments for the disease, including salvarsan, mercury ointment, and bistum, were toxic, dangerous, and of questionable effectiveness. But the original goal of the study was to determine if patients were better off if not treated with these toxic remedies. Some of the infected men would be treated for the disease, and others would serve as a control group. If one of the treatments was proven to be effective, it would become the standard of care for this killer disease. Unfortunately for the men in Tuskegee, the 1929 stock market crash resulted in a loss of funding for the treatment component of the study, which then changed into an observation of the effects of untreated syphilis. The study became infamous because the uneducated sharecroppers enrolled in the program had never given informed consent. Further, they were not informed of their diagnosis or told they had a sexually transmitted disease. Instead, the United States Public Health Service informed the men that vitamins, tonics, and aspirins would help cure their bad blood, and that these treatments would be provided free in the study. Over the first years of the project, a few men received sporadic treatment with arsenals and bismuth, but they were never told when treatment was discontinued. In some instances, they were openly lied to, and informed that they had been treated when in fact they had received placebo tablets. Occasionally, uncomfortable diagnostic procedures were misrepresented to them as actual treatments. For example, midway through the study, 400 subjects were sent a letter entitled "Last Chance for a Free Treatment," which told them that a spinal tap would help cure their symptoms. By 1947, penicillin had become the standard treatment for syphilis, but rather than starting to treat all the study subjects with this drug, the Tuskegee scientists withheld the drug and continued to study how the disease spread and killed. The subjects were also prevented from receiving syphilis treatments that were available to other people in the area by notifying hospitals and the military not to provide participants with penicillin. During World War II, 250 of the men registered for the draft and were consequently diagnosed in order to obtain treatment for syphilis. However, the Public Health Service blocked this directive and stated, "So far, we are keeping the known positive patients from getting treatment." So far, we are keeping the known positive patients from getting treatment. The study continued until 1972, when leaks to the Washington Star and the New York Times resulted in public turmoil. Congressional hearings and the appointment of an ad hoc advisory panel would determine the study was medically unjustified and order its termination. The Public Health Service remained unrepentant. They remain unrepentant. These are all part of the things of their advertising. So they had things as far as colored blood tests, free treatment. They're saying colored blood tests, free treatment, things of that nature, and saying that, hey, that was justifiable as to why they were doing these particular things to our people. So having a long list. Let me get this. So this is one of those signs right here. Colored people, do you have bad blood? Free blood tests, free treatments. Some of these men, these experiments being done, better pictures of the experiments. Some of the spinal taps they were talking about, which they told them was actually cured, but really wasn't. The infections. Even this, a caricature of it. Now, can we give him penicillin? Ignore the syphilis patient, experiment in progress. They were injected with placebos, openly lied to. Now, listen to this. The USPHS defended the ethics of the study. In 1972, the Tuskegee study was brought to public and national attention by a whistleblower who gave information to the Washington Star and the New York Times. John Heller of PHS, who in later years of the study led the national division, defended the ethics of the study, stating, "The longer the study, the better the ultimate information we will derive." Dr. Heller, in charge of on-site medical operations in the Tuskegee study for many years before he became director of the venereal disease section of PHS 1943 to 1948. Heller's leadership coincided with the years when penicillin was introduced as routine treatment for syphilis in PHS clinics. When the Nuremberg Code to protect the rights of research subjects was formulated, Heller stoutly defended the ethics of the study and claimed that he saw no association whatever between the unethical experiment performed by the Nazis and the Tuskegee syphilis study. Going back to when doctors kill, who and why, page 91. So I've been stating on from last off, have been volunteers. The men have been volunteers and were always happy to see the doctors. That's where he takes no fault. He says the men were always happy and had been volunteers, were always happy to see the doctors. An Alabama state health officer dismissed the criticisms as insignificant, stating that somebody is trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. Dr. John R. Heller, once again, that name, who had led the study program in later years, including the period coincided with the routine successful treatment of syphilis with penicillin, stated the men's status did not warrant ethical debate. They were subjects, not patients, clinical material, not sick people. By the end of the study, only 74 of the test subjects were still alive. 28 of the men had died directly of syphilis. 100 were dead of related complications. 40 of their wives had been infected, and 19 of the children had been born with congenital syphilis. The victims' families were never told that they could have been treated. Paying a debt to society. When a person is sent to prison for rehabilitation, the intent is not to give them a disease to rehabilitate from. Nonetheless, over the past century, American physicians have found prison inmates to be handy subjects for a variety of experiments. In 1915, Dr. Joseph Goldberger induced pellagra, a Nicene deficiency that damages the skin and the central nervous system in 12 Mississippi inmates, in an attempt to find a cure for the disease. One test subject later said that he had been through 1,000 hells. In 1935, the director of the U.S. Public Health Office admitted that officials had known for some time that pellagra was caused by Nicene deficiencies, but did nothing about it, apparently because most victims were poor African Americans. Skipping down, the subjects in the Mississippi study were truly volunteers who were eventually treated in an attempt to restore their health. There's more pictures. So for those who didn't know that study, this was it. Syphilis. 6 of 10 cured because they did not wait too long. Propaganda. Just another source, CDC. We're back out of that. Time is 8:57. Would you like to continue? Would you like to close out? Real question. Continue. We get only further into children. You had something to say, Elder? Go ahead, Kazak.
Yeah, I'm thinking, King, that you said that you would do a 2-part series. It's a lot of information, man.
It is.
But one thing I'd like to say is very well laid out, very well presented. I thought I was watching the True Nation movie channel. I'm like, hold up, man. You know, is this for real? Yeah, man, it's very edifying, King. You know, and like I also call you the double threat. Your strategist as well as smooth on the mic. So it's totally up to the house, man. I'm just.
Okay, con. All right, beautiful. So they're still working on the food, so I'll go on for a little longer, and then, I can stop anytime. We'll do a part 2 and continue on with more of these things, all right? So it is a lot of information, like I said. Just kind of take note. Remember the names. You're going to hear things again and again. So now I'm going to kind of tackle one of the bigger parts of it, that where does this all kind of come from? What does it tie into? It deals with some of the mindset and the thoughts of eugenics. So it deals with eugenics. So we're going to get into that segment. Let's go back to the slide. Back to the PowerPoint and back to my portfolio. Con, you can stop me at any time. Let's get eugenics. I want you to write down some names in this order. Thomas Malthus is first. After him, Sir Francis Galton is second. After him, Margaret Sanger. After her, the Gates family. Bill and Melinda Gates, all right? That's your timeline and connecting the dots, okay? Go ahead, Elder. Not a problem. I'll bring them up right now. We'll get some of their mindset. Let's skip down. I'm going to skip down, and I'm going to go back up. So genocide in action, publicly funded genocide in schools, impact of abortion, planned black genocide. Birth control and abortion are turning out to be great eugenic advances of our time. Frederick Osborne, founding member of the American Eugenic Society, 1973. Frederick Osborne, founding member of the American Eugenic Society, 1973. American abortion is orchestrated black genocide. This is Thomas Malthus, 1798. It does not, however, seem impossible that by an intention to breed a certain degree of improvement similar to that among animals, might take place among men. Francis Galton, who was the cousin of Charles Darwin. Eugenics is the study of the agencies, and he's also the father of eugenics. Eugenics is the study of the agencies under social control that may improve or impair the racial qualities of future generations, either physically or mentally. Theodore Roosevelt, I wish very much that the wrong people could be prevented entirely from breeding. When the evil nature of these people is sufficiently flagrant, this should be done. Margaret Sanger, which we're going to get a lot more of her quotes later on, because I want to do another segment that just deals with that area, Planned Parenthood, and what's known as the Negro Project, which covers Margaret Sanger's whole foundation of Planned Parenthood was to exterminate the black population. That was it. That was the number one reason. Everything she did and invented was ultimately for that purpose, to exterminate us by any means necessary. Birth control must lead ultimately to a cleaner race. Margaret Sanger, 1922. I'm not going to read all of hers because I'm going to read them later. Bertrand Russell, 1953. There are three ways of securing a society that shall be stable as regards population, and this is the heart of it. The first is that of birth control. The second, that of infanticide or really destructive wars. And the third, that of general misery, except for a powerful minority. Julian Huxley, 1946. It would be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with greatest care and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake, so that much that now is unthinkable may at least become thinkable. Julian Huxley, 1946. So, Jacques Council, 1991. In order to stabilize world population, we must eliminate 350,000 people per day. It is a horrible thing to say, but it's just as bad not to say it. Get more on him. Thomas Malthus. The power of population is so superior to the power of the earth to produce substance for man, that premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race. Thomas Malthus, 1798. If the present growth trends in world population, industrialization, pollution, food production, and resource depletion continue unchanged, the limits to growth on this planet will be reached sometime within the next 100 years. The Club of Rome think tank, 1972. Thomas Malthus. This is, of course, Sir Francis Galton, 1822 to 1911. Get some highlights. This is that of my cousins, Charles Darwin, Sir Francis Galton, and the birth of eugenics. Sir Francis Galton, scientist, African explorer, and statistician, was a key figure in statistical history. He was the man who devised the statistical concept of regression and correlation. He was also Charles Darwin's cousin, and inspired by his reading of Darwin, he was the founder of eugenics, the science of improving the human race through selective breeding. All right. So we'll get more of this, but let's get, should be good? Okay. So now, what I'm gonna do next time, we're gonna deal with a few things. One, we're gonna get deeper into eugenics. We're gonna cover more of the quotes by Bill Gates in different areas where he made a lot of these quotes, a lot of these meetings. When you deal with Thomas Malthus and Sir Francis Galton, it was actually after Sir Francis Galton's death that they actually started yearly meetings in London to meet on these things, to meet about eugenics and population control. These meetings are still had to this day. Bill Gates is one of the ones, but it brings up other notable figures, from Oprah Winfrey to even Rockefellers, you know, in population control and eugenics and buying into the vaccine industry. So let me actually go ahead, and I'll also get more so too, the Vaccine Guide by Dr. Randall Newton-Sider that deals with more of those details after I kind of deal with eugenics. And from eugenics, I'm going to deal with the vaccine information. So, and more of those experiments done from a timeline throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. All right, so that's more so the information to kind of come. So the food ready in the back? Everyone good? Can we get someone to find out if they are ready in the back? They ready? Okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so is everybody good? We got something to take from it? All right, so now the biggest thing I want to prove is that there's a consistent history that the so-called white man experiments on us in America, need it be through the CIA, FBI, U.S. Army, universities, institutions, none of these things are off the table in terms of experimentation on us, and they make sure they target us as Israelites first and foremost with these experiments, and that they use us as the guinea pigs. Go ahead, Elder. The whole reason why eugenics is so important, because it's where the ideology comes from. The whole reason why they push for this is population control and to exterminate us as the Negroes. So that's why I deal more with when doctors kill, who and why, and just some of the mindset behind a lot of these things, and even some of the quotes of Margaret Sanger, because the whole goal is to exterminate us and to give us a lot of information. Let me just go ahead and read this. Let me give you an example. This is an American Dilemma. So this is from the book, An American Dilemma. So chapter 7, population, page 167. I'm gonna skip down. One reason for the inarticulateness and inadequacy of American discussion of population policy is the heterogeneity of America's population and the fact that some of its competent groups are commonly considered to be inferior. Skipping down. We shall avoid the unsettled problem of an American population policy at large and restrict our treatment to the Negro angle of it. In stating our value premises, a distinction must be made between ends and means. This is part of the ideology. If we forget about the means for the moment and consider only the quantitative goal for Negro population policy, there is no doubt that the overwhelming majority of white Americans desire that there be as few Negroes as possible in America. If the Negroes could be eliminated from America or greatly decreased in numbers, this would meet the whites' approval, provided that it could be accomplished by means which are also approved. Who's doing this approving? Considerably, an increase in the population of Negroes in the American population is commonly looked upon as undesirable. These opinions are seldom expressed publicly, as the opinions for reasons which we shall develop are not practicable either. They are not much in the foreground of public attention, but as general valuations, they are nearly always present. Commonly, it is considered a great misfortune for America that Negro slaves were ever imported. The presence of Negroes in America today is usually considered as a plight of the nation, and particularly of the South. It should be noted that the general valuation of the desirability of a decrease in Negro population, this is also from American Dilemma, page 168, of a decreased Negro population is not necessarily hostile to the Negro people. It is shared even by enlightened white Americans who do not hold the common belief that Negroes are inferior as a race. Usually it is pointed out that the Negroes far better and meet less prejudice when they are few in number. Reading on, this will be the last page I'll read to better answer your part, because for the moment. There's an important qualification to be made to these statements. As we have found at many points in this study, people are not always consistent in their valuations. Many white Southerners live by exploiting Negroes, and many fortunes have been built up by cheating Negroes. Many white Southerners realize their economic dependence on the Negro and would not like to lose him. Many white Southerners have opposed all back to Africa or 49 state movements, which would eliminate Negroes from their midst. When Negroes began to migrate northward in great numbers during the First World War, many white Southerners made strenuous efforts to stop them. Propaganda was distributed, threats were made, Negro leaders were bribed, favors were bestowed, Northern labor agents were prohibited, fined, or beaten up. The dominant upper and middle agents were prohibited, fined, or beaten up. The dominant upper and middle classes of whites in the South realized, for the most part, that they would stand to lose economically if the Negro were to disappear. With the decline of the cotton economy, which we shall analyze in chapters 11 and 12, the valuation not so strong now as in 1917 and 1918. 2, the valuation not held by most Northerners or by Southern poor whites. And this valuation in the economic sphere is not necessarily tied to the Negro. If poor whites could be exploited with the same facility, the dominant white Southerners would be glad to be rid of the Negro. The valuation in the socio-political sphere, however, is tied to the Negro. The Negro is a problem, and practically all Southerners, as practically all Northerners, would like to get rid of them. More important from a practical and political standpoint is that the valuation in the economic sphere is only a short-term attitude. More importantly, listen to this. Southerners who gain economically from the presence of the Negro are concerned only that the Negro should not disappear during their lifetime or at most, their children's lifetime. When they think in terms of a long span of future generations, the valuation that the Negro should be eliminated is almost completely dominated. And as we should presently see, all white Americans agree that if the Negro is to be eliminated, he must be eliminated slowly, so as not to hurt any living individual Negroes. Therefore, the dominant American valuation is that the Negro should be eliminated from the American scene, but slowly. And they do that through poisoning our food supply, our water supply, and these vaccinations. So, and I'll continue with that next time. I'll go ahead and it's, oh, I'm sorry, Asha has something. Go ahead, Out. What was the name of the last book? The name of the last book that I brought is An American Dilemma. An American Dilemma. All right, so I'll continue with other books. I'm especially get deep into the vaccine guide. I'm gonna get real deep into this book, Eugenics, the Mindset, and then deal with a lot with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who they learned from, which is Margaret Sanger, who she learned from, Thomas Malthus, who we learned from, she learned from Sir Francis Galton, learned from Thomas Malthus. The ideology passed down the same, and highlights a lot what we're reading in American Dilemma. Go ahead, Elder.
After all of that information that Esau and their wickedness prevailed or did, I held my head down and I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
But when I looked up, I saw you two brethren, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we were winning in, man.
Mm-hmm.
After it's all before us, we're going to look up and see ourselves, man.
Gone. Absolutely. Go ahead, Doc.
Another thing, make sure everybody go check out Songbird, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It came out today. Me and my wife seen it, but it's kind of showing us like what they're gonna start doing. I ain't gonna tell nobody because I don't want to, spoil it. But make sure y'all check it out. It's
I
crazy.
saw the movie Songbird.
It's called Songbird. You gotta digitally download it like on Amazon.com, Google Play, YouTube, Spectrum, DirecTV. Yeah, any of those platforms, download it. Yeah, or Fire Stick, of course.
Yeah, we're about to close out, but I just want to touch on one thing. As he was reading, it said the whites, the so-called whites, it says that the Negro population is undesirable. And that's straight coming out of the scriptures, you know what I'm saying? So we understand that prophecy, the scriptures never fail us. So I just want to bring out one precept because, we in the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah, and it's important for us to gather together. That's what the scriptures is demanding of us. But Zephaniah 2:1 real quick. Yeah.
The book of Zephaniah, chapter 2 and verse 1. Gather yourselves together. Yea, gather together, O nation not desired.
So that's talking to the Israelites. We must gather ourselves together. We're scattered abroad in all land masses, and we got to come together in these last days as a righteous seed, keeping the commandments, so we can try to get this kingdom. So gather together, O nation not desired. And we already know the nations that do not desire us. You see them on an everyday basis. They own your local corner stores, your 7-Elevens. They're listed in Psalms 83. So never forget that. We got to, understand that we're all we have in these last days up under the banner of the Most High and His Son, Yahushua Christ. So.
Come. Absolutely. All right, Israel, hopefully everyone got something. Appreciate all those online. Hope you learned something. And next month, most high willing, I'll return with a part 2. We'll get even further more into a lot of these vaccines, the research done, the cover-ups, and a lot of the side effects, a lot of the links and how a lot of these studies are done, how they kind of set the ratios and what they decide to count and what they don't decide to count, and more like what the whistleblower was kind of getting into. And this book covers a lot of that, so I'll go real deep into that and just more of the meetings and things and Bill and Gates and all sorts of other, types of links and how things are done, how things were funded. And that's when we'll get more into like Pfizer, things of that nature, and some of their history and other things they've been involved in, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and close out. Go ahead, Amadi. Oh, I'm sorry.